on to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, JodieLynn Creighton.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And JodieLynn, we got a double dose of money coaching today because our guest is also she self-styles as a love and money coach. So just a little overlap going on there. And I have to admit, when she signed on to join us on the show today, all I kept thinking about was, wow, this is going to be great. I mean, I'm going to ask probably one question, and then it's going to be JodieLynn and Sophie just going back and forth because you guys are going to be I just feel like you guys are going to be feeding off of each other. So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But Sophie, first of all, thank you for joining us on the program today. How are you doing?
Oh, I think Sophie lost audio.
Oh, dear. Sophie, can you hear us? Oh, let's send her a little message there to reboot. Okay, so hopefully she'll...
Technology.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, I'm not sure what
there
happened.
we are.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but I can hear you now.
That's the main thing. So I was just saying that you and JodieLynn are probably going to be doing most of the conversation because you guys have so much overlap in what you guys do. But I start off by welcoming you. So welcome to the program. And how are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm actually doing really great. Today was a great day for me.
Cool. All right.
Awesome.
Well, we like that. Yeah. Where are you connecting from?
Toronto, Ontario.
Ah, there we go. We got another parallel.
Canadian.
Where are you guys?
I'm from Edmonton, Alberta.
Oh, wow. I was born in Calgary.
Oh, no way. See?
And you
Small
Walt?
world.
I am in Connecticut. I'm the U.S. resident here. But
There we go.
Today, once again, this often happens on Wednesdays too. We get a lot of Canadian guests, don't we, JodieLynn? I mean,
We
like
do.
a lot, like more than
that's great.
half. Yeah,
Really?
it's really interesting how that works out. Yeah, it's really interesting how that works out. I mean, last
Is it
week
the
was
same on every day? Like
no, it's
also get
Wednesdays. No,
Just Wednesdays. The
Interesting.
Canadians want
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why. Well,
I
I mean,
I
it's
just
not
attract the Canadians.
never. I mean, we have had Canadians on other days, but it's amazing how often it happens on Wednesday. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Are you on the show every Wednesday, JodieLynn?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's what it is. Her energy's pulling for us.
right?
A little
Yeah.
comfort there.
I
Bringing
think
in
so.
all the great Canadians.
I love it. So, Sophie, give us a little bit about your story. How did you end up doing what you're doing now, being a love and money coach? Because there's always a good story behind these things. That's why I always like to bring that out first.
I have an interesting and unique story for sure. So I grew up in humble beginnings. My parents divorced when I was 2. And interesting enough, as I, was going through my younger years, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a divorce lawyer because I just thought at the time, that was the right thing for me to do, given the fact that my parents were divorced. I wanted to be that woman who supported other women going through a divorce. So lawyer was like always on my mind. And then I watched this fabulous movie called Pretty Woman. And I thought, I want to be the Richard Gere in Pretty Woman. I want to. There was something about, buying companies, taking them apart, doing that sort of thing. That was kind of exciting for me. And then I went to university and I thought, I'm going to be an environmental lawyer. I'm going to help big businesses get greener. And I realized how expensive university was. And I thought, oh God, I got to start thinking about something else. And I didn't really want to do another 4 years. So I started selling gym memberships, funny enough. And that's when I really learned the power of a commission check and how I could write my own check based on my own performance, which I really liked because I had the gift of the gab. I was a really great listener. I asked really good questions. What I could do very well is ask for the sale, which I learned many years later that that's what most salespeople have a hard time doing. And so because I could do that, I could sell quite a bit. And the commission structure there was great. So I put myself through university. And then it was good. And then fast forward, I started doing some coaching and leadership and personal development work. And I thought, what would be interesting is if I married sales and coaching together. And so I traveled across North America. I worked for very large organizations. Like here in Canada, I worked with all the big banks. So that would be CIBC, Bank of Montreal, TD. I worked with companies like Mackenzie Financial. I worked with Bell. In the States, I worked with BlackRock and US Cellular. So I was working specifically with the sales team, teaching them the sales process of a consultative sales call, the sales skills of listening and questioning and positioning and presenting and closing. And the
Wow.
mindset around what it is to, be great at sales. And then I would work with the leadership team and teach them how to be more coach-like in their leadership, because just like telling is not selling, telling is not coaching, telling is not leading. So I would teach the leaders how to be more coach-like in their interactions with their one-on-ones with their team, so that they could really get the best out of their team. We always used to say, it doesn't matter how great your strategy is, if you can't get your team to align to the strategy and execute, we really got no, like, this is good on paper, right?
Right.
So I did that work. I did that work for quite a while, to be honest with you. And during that time I was married. So I'm 47 now. About 6 or 7 years ago, I burnt out pretty badly. One day I just woke up and I couldn't walk. It was a pretty serious burnout. I mean, the lifestyle of traveling all across North America and staying in fancy hotels and eating at great restaurants all sounds amazing.
Mhm.
But when you don't have time to go to the washroom and have a bio break because you're so back to back, it doesn't necessarily feel so good on the body. I was working with very large organizations who are very interested in ROI, and I was interested in human performance. The two do go hand in hand, but you have to be interested in the human to get the ROI, in my opinion. And so that was like
Yeah.
a bit of a rub on my energy. And so I took some time to really just think about what I wanted to do next. I mean, I had a wonderful corporate career. I feel blessed by what I got to do and the tables I got to sit at and the executives I got to work with and the teams I got to work with. But I just had lost my spark for that type of work, mostly because it was in a corporate environment, and mostly because the conversation just got to be a little too insular for me. It was like only in one sandbox, and being so committed and interested in human performance, I wanted to talk about other things, like more intimate things, like relationship stuff and heart-centered stuff and generational trauma type stuff and legacy type stuff and leadership stuff from a different type of perspective, other than trying to get someone to do something, or gain your alignment from your team, which could also be considered parenting, like the same sort of skill. Or even sales. Like at the end of the day, the core of it is the core of it. I really just took some time to just ponder. I was 37 years old. I've been working since I was 13, so that's like quite a long career already. And during that time, my ex-husband and I at the time were married for 18 years. We decided to consciously uncouple, which was a heartbreak. Even though you consciously choose to uncouple, that doesn't mean that you're not gonna feel something about it.
Oh yeah.
During the divorce, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oof.
Oh my goodness.
So I sort of felt like the universe waxed my whole body at the same time.
Yeah.
And really had to do some deep inner work. I was somebody who was committed to inner work since I was in my early 20s. So like I've been doing work up until now. This is about 42. So I've been doing work solidly for 20 years. But the scariest moment in my life was sitting across from the doctor, who happened to be a walk-in doctor at the time. She was just like, I wasn't even her patient. She had to read the results.
Lovely.
I mean, talk about a bad day at the office, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hear those words, you have cancer. Like that was like an oh shit moment for me. I mean, I've had many, but not like that. And so also it was an opportunity for me to completely reinvent myself and redesign my whole life, and the divorce was also an opportunity for me to get dreams fulfilled that I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to fulfill inside the marriage, because it just wasn't a fit for the marriage, and I really try to take a look at every breakdown and try to find the opportunity and the growth in it. And so when I was going through this challenging time, it was over the course of 18 months, this challenging time of going through the divorce and going through the diagnosis of cancer, I reconnected to my suppressed desires of having a child. So I would have been now 42 years old. And the doctors advised me against getting pregnant because it was a risk for the cancer to return. They wanted me, I wasn't a candidate for chemo, which was good for me because that was too scary for me. It wasn't something I wanted to do. But I was advised to go on tamoxifen for 2 years and do 25 radiation treatments. And I just knew in my heart that at 42 years old, if I had done that treatment, I was not going to get pregnant. And I also knew in my heart I had a chance before going through treatment. I was still young enough, considered a geriatric woman in terms of like trying to get pregnant. If you think about like how long your eggs actually last, it's actually not that bad of a term. It's quite accurate, to be honest with you. At 42, your eggs are on the other side. And so I refused treatment. I refused treatment to try to get pregnant. I realized during this very deep excavation that I needed to do inside of me that I was okay with failure, but I was not okay with regret. And I have failed many times in my life. I was bankrupt at a younger point in time. You could consider divorce to be a failure. You could consider cancer being a failure in the sense I took it as I failed my body. And so I deeply felt into, I have been using the excuses of not having enough money because I came from such humble beginnings. I was like in and out of women's shelters when I was younger, as an excuse not to have a child and not enough time to not have a child, that I couldn't use those. I was faced with a situation where I just couldn't use those excuses anymore. It wasn't true anymore. And so I had to really confront, like, am I going to be okay not even having tried? And I wasn't okay with that. And so I took the stand to refuse treatment to get pregnant. And I will just say this because I think it's important for any listener, that you never know who's listening, and somebody might have gone through some sort of health crisis or is going through it. I mean, you have to be very discerning and ask a lot of questions. And, I was young at 42, considered women live to 80 or 85. So I was only considered middle-aged in that regard. And so the chances of cancer coming back is like I had a 30% chance that the cancer would come back because of my age. And the treatment of tamoxifen and 25 radiation treatments reduced the risk of cancer coming back from 30 to 15%. And I just didn't really feel like a 15% reduction was a significant amount of reduced risk to take on that type of treatment. So thankfully I had the wherewithal.
Whoops. We
lost her.
Hopefully she'll reconnect in just a moment. She'll realize when her screen doesn't respond that, oh, wait a minute, they don't hear me anymore.
She's gone. That's such a impactful moment.
Yeah,
in the
right.
Story.
Okay, we're ready for the climax, and oh nope, it's like cut to a commercial break or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I kept thinking though. I mean, wow. I thought the only parallel between you and her was being a money coach. Apparently, there are other parallels to be explored here. This is it. This is going to be an interesting conversation when we get her connected back in. There's no doubt in my mind.
So many.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, oh, wow, it's so interesting. Like the timing that she talked about, and very eerily similar timings for me throughout my life, and very similar experiences.
Yeah. Wow. Really quite amazing. As you were listening to her story, what was the first one that jumped out? Like when she said X, what was the X that jumped out to you? Like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's me too.
It was the first thing that the similarity that jumped out was the personal development one, actually.
Oh, okay.
It was, in my early 20s, that's when I started personal development. And so I was like, oh, interesting. And then, humble beginnings. I also wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger, but environmental law, that's what I thought about doing, and also thought it was too expensive. And then when she said bankruptcy, I went through consumer proposal. And the ex, I was thinking of that ex that I had broken up with right before that. Basically, it was the domino effect breakup and then consumer proposal. So It was all of those things. I was like, whoa.
And JodieLynn, I actually had a screen freeze too. She's tried to connect and I can't connect her right now. So I'm going to quit the browser, talk about your
Okay.
story for just a moment. I should be back in about 30 seconds and hopefully connect everything in here.
Okay.
All right.
Amazing.
Well, this is
Yeah.
this is the way it sometimes goes, right? It's like all of a sudden technology gets overturned by the energy. Our energy is too big right now. We got to calm it down.
Absolutely. Our
Okay.
energy has taken over.
I'll be right back.
Sounds good. It's so interesting. The other thing that I was thinking for everybody that's listening, as Sophie was going through her story, she was talking about tragedy and she was talking about opportunity. And what immediately downloaded for me is, in tragedy, there is a light of opportunity. And I think that is a message that we need to hear more often. And that's something that I felt through the tragedies that I've been through in my life. And, I'm talking to a friend earlier today, they're going through some really rough stuff. That we have Sophie back. Yay. And Walt.
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry, I was very confused for a second.
Yeah, all good. We were like on the edge of our seats listening, and then you dropped off. And we were like,
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Please continue.
Okay, so I think I said I was wanted to share this part of my story in case there's anyone listening who's going through a health concern or had a health concern. It's important questions to know how to answer. I mean, like when I got told I had cancer, the amount of fear that goes on in the body and the brain, it just, inside of fear, the mind shuts down. And I'm so thankful that I had the strength and the language skills to say, if I choose to do nothing, what are the chances of the cancer coming back? And my oncologist is like, that's a different spreadsheet. And I'm like, well, do you think that we could take a look at that spreadsheet, please? And the results came back that if I had done nothing, no tamoxifen, no radiation, nothing, there was an 89% chance cancer would not come back systemically. And then 5 years, 82, and then it extrapolated like that. And I just was like, are you telling me that I have an 89% chance that the cancer doesn't come back in 5 years? He goes, yeah, but it goes down. I'm like, I think those odds are pretty good. I'm going to take those odds and I'm going to go for what I really want to go for in my life. And it was like one of those moments. I mean, like, choosing to consciously uncouple was another one of those moments. I had to just stand in my truth and just really communicate what I wanted, which I think specific, for women specifically, and then more my generation is a little more challenging for us to do. But then to be at the doctor's office in front of somebody who almost has authority to say the same thing and be like, I'm actually going to go against what is the recommended protocol here is, and I'm going to live inside of what I feel is true for me. And I actually asked him the question, I'm like, do you think I'm crazy? Like, is my thinking off? And the sad part is for me to stand in such alignment with myself, it felt so off because I had never stood in such alignment with myself before. I didn't really understand what that felt like. So I was just like, well, am I losing it? And the doctor said to me, right? Because it's like
very
so
normal.
opposite.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. I never really had that kind of a conversation with someone before. So the doctor's like, actually, no, Sophie, I could get behind your decision. And I was just like, well, why don't you suggest that? Mm-hmm. And they're just like, well, we don't do that in the medical field. Some people undergo cancer treatments for a 1% benefit. Mm. And I was just so saddened in that moment by how many women and people don't necessarily have the language skills or the communication skills or the conscious skills to have the questioning to discern, and make decisions out of fear. There's like so much fear around that. Yeah. So 8 months later, after my lumpectomy, I had repartnered during that time. 8 months later, on our first try, we got pregnant with a baby boy. Yeah. I was 43, less than a 5% chance of getting pregnant. I had a brilliant pregnancy because I was a geriatric mother. I was seen here at a fertility clinic, which means I had all the top of the line equipment. And because it was the pandemic, there was no lineups. Oh, so, that was great. And my gynecologist, my OB, was like, Sophie, the doctors, we sit at the table, we have our round table discussions at the end of the week, and of all the women, you're having a miracle pregnancy. Like, we just don't understand how this pregnancy is just so brilliant for you. And I was just so like honored and blessed that I stood in my truth and I took a risk and I went for it. And the energy of pulling for that, just believing that I could, and this applies in so many different contexts. So just believing that and aligning with the universe in that respect, I manifested it, or I was rewarded or blessed, whatever way you want to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
So we went through the pandemic, which was very challenging for me because I was very prepared to have some limitations being pregnant, but I wasn't prepared to have all my privileges taken away. And mentally, I started to collapse, baby, with pandemic. And like, that was challenging. But on the other side of it, my partner got to take a whole year off for paternity leave because I worked for myself. Actually, I wasn't working at the time, so he got the full year. It was the pandemic. We weren't going anywhere. The three of us got to have this sweet, special, unique experience where we had this little hub in the condo, which most people don't get ever. And because of the conditions of the pandemic, we were in so much joy to just have each other in this like little nest, which is so good for the baby.
Sure.
You know? So good for the baby. And so baby turns 18 months and it's time for mommy to get a bit of a break. Baby goes to daycare. I took about 6 months that whole summer just for myself to just like, it's been a lot. And I just thought, like if I'm going to do work again, because I thought there was a point in time I thought I might not go back to work. But then I got bored. That's the truth of it. I just started to have a little too much time on my hands, and I thought, what do I really want to do? I don't necessarily want to go back to the corporate world. I don't want to go back to sales training. I could do that. But again, I want to stand in my truth. Like now I have evidence that when I go for what I really want and I stand in my truth and I align and I put all my intention and my energy towards that and it's one directional, there's no polarity or duality or a wobble in my belief, I get it. So like, I was like, wow, baby's the biggest evidence of that for me. I'm going to try again. So I thought, who do I really want to serve and how do I want to help? And I thought, I really want to work with women who've been through some similar situation like myself. Heartbreak. I want to help them heal through heartbreak and attract their soulmate love and build the life that they want to build and help them develop and empower them in the skills that they need to skill so they can make the money they want to make. And that's why I call it love and money. And that could look like owning your own business and I help you manage your team or have strategy or help you with your sales. Or that could look like a younger woman who wants to set herself up for life and she wants to understand how to conduct herself at a business meeting and how to have a consultative call. And so it could look like that. And I wanted to really work with women with heartbreak. Money was always my thing, business, sales. That's kind of how I look at it. But because I went through what I call like 3+1 heartbreaks. I had the divorce, I had cancer, to walk away from a thriving business that my ex-husband and I had built and my career had ended, and then we went through the pandemic, and I think that was a big heartbreak for everybody. And that for me, in 2 years, that amount of heartbreak, it was so challenging to navigate. There wasn't somebody to support me through that, to help me connect the dots or to have perspective or to, I had to put a team around me. And I was good to do that because of all the personal growth I'd done over the last 20 years. But I just don't know that for a woman going through that there is that other woman for her. And I wanted to be here for her. I wanted to be here to support her through that type of heartbreak. And I wanted to support her so that she could be somebody who shows up and be independent, to give herself more financial independence. So she has more choice for her and her family, whether she was inside of a relationship or she had children. And that was where my heart was. And that's is why I'm here today. And how I got to be doing this type of work is because those conversations and this contribution that I can make for that makes it well worth it for me to go back to work, but makes my heart fuller. And that's, I've come to a place now, I'm starting to see that perhaps I went through that because this is now my purpose, and I have so much depth and wealth of connecting the dots and perspective and reframing and recontextualizing and like deepening based on like, you know, your childhood and generation. Like there's just so much now that I understand that I'm like I have that spark to flow it out again, you know, because now I feel full.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What an amazing story.
Yeah, thank you.
I asked you before, JodieLynn, what jumped out at you. You started to talk about how it was doing the self-development work. That was the first thing that she said that resonated with you. So, I mean, start there. But what are some of the other things that jump out to you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many similarities or so many like linear times that I recognize in my own life and through your story. Like just even like wanting to be a lawyer, I wanted to do that. Starting personal development early, going through a bad breakup, all of these things. Even the some of the health challenges. It wasn't cancer, but all of these things. And I think that we're obviously not the only ones. I think that a lot of people can relate to your story and can see those similar things like benchmarks that have happened in their life. And actually, when you jumped off, what I was saying to everyone that was listening is when you were talking about tragedy, Sophie, you were talking about opportunity. And what downloaded for me is that in tragedy, there is the light of opportunity. And that's really what I get from your story.
Thank you. Yes, I actually just did a live on that today. It's like, how do you stay in your power in the midst of crisis? And the way to do that is to look for the opportunity in it. And it's a choice. And not choosing is also choosing. And for me, it's the only choice. And that if you can, it's like standing in the eye of the storm, like a tornado. And if you can like stand there and you can see the light, the beacon in the tornado, and you focus on that, it'll pull you through, Yeah. I love that you said
Absolutely.
that.
It's funny how often it plays out here on the show too. I mean, almost every single guest who comes onto the show has some kind of a story like that, where they went through we often call it like a crash and burn or something like that. And that's where they did their best learning. It's one of those things that I've known about this now for years. I'm still amazed by the fact that we need to go through the crap in order to learn the most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not all of us choose to do the learning, right? I think that it's actually a choice to do the excavation. I mean, it's like deconstruct. I had to deconstruct every thought process I had. One of the things I learned is when you have cancer, like this predicated on the emotion of fear, which is then covered by anger and sadness and resentment and like all that. And so I had to guilt and shame, and I had to start to understand why I had feelings of guilt and shame and what were the situations that had me react in a particular way that produced that type of guilt and shame cycle. And then I had to be like, okay, I have to shift my way of that now so that I don't have those emotions, so it doesn't manifest in the body and feed the abnormal cell development, right? But that's a choice too. So I just building off what you said, like that we have to go through there to get it. It's just, it's a choice, and I'm glad that I made that choice. And for everybody who does, you get that there's so much learning in the well of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think prepared you to be that type of person? Because I've found, I've ran into lots of different people in, my lifetime. And there's some people who choose, as you did, to see the opportunity. And there's some people that just get stuck in victim and they choose not to see the opportunity. What do you think prepared you yourself for choosing the opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I started doing personal development work around the age of 23 years old, and I started with I don't know, maybe you've heard of it, Landmark Education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I spent about 7 years at Landmark Education, which is all about possibility and like how to take radical responsibility for yourself. And you're the source, you get to the point where you're the source of all your life. And then if you're the source of all your life and you take responsibility for everything that's happening in your life, then you have the power to shift that. And that's where you co-create with the universe. So doing that in my 20s for 7 years. And then I went on to do other work. And then I got certified as a coach. So I was so grateful that I did that in my 20s, because it set me up for some pretty significant life transitions that I feel I handled very elegantly.
Mm-hmm. You had the tools.
Yeah.
And that's
do
an
a lot of
ongoing
mindset
process.
training.
right? I mean, that's not something you just do at 23.
I've been doing it for 20 years, so I'm practiced at it. So yeah, it's an ongoing process. It's not something you can do at 23 for one course and stop. It's not something you can do for a year at 23 and then stop.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm at a point 20 years later. Listen, I'm not perfect, and so I have many moments, but my more default way of being, should I keep everything in place, like the proper support system, is to go that way.
Yeah, my God, you're
Yeah.
not perfect. What's wrong with you?
I know. Sorry. Was that a qualification I missed?
Not at all.
It's funny though how often we get into that perfection thing. I think we all have a tendency to go there. Like I've got to be perfect. I got to do this perfectly. I need to I need to find the perfect solution for this thing. And it takes, I don't know, maybe it just takes going through that crap. Maybe it just takes a lot of experience. But somewhere along the line, we come to the realization that it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know why we do that, but we do at some point. Maybe we get worn down. I don't know.
Well, at this point, like in terms of talking about being able to focus my mindset on reframing and looking for the positive of it, it's that it's how my life works. And when I don't do that, I'm just very unhappy, and and people irritate me, and I get annoyed, and I just like, ugh. And that's just how I am. And I feel like for a lot of people who do this work, for the way that I do it, it's like, it's a vocation, it's a calling. It's like, that's just how life works. Like this is the way it has to go for me. And then what I have to do is put things in place to maintain the energy to do that, which means I need to sleep properly. I need to drink water properly. I need to eat properly. I need to have enough, care. And I have to make sure the people around me are also in that same vibration and frequency, or they pull me out. And the energetic pull to go that way and then pull myself back is a lot. And so now I, choose to engage in those types of relationships very seldomly, and more often those are more work exchanges, because there's a proper exchange there. And even now, more in where I'm at in my life and my career, I'm like very, very particular about who I even work with, because it's an energetic pull. So working with someone who's in alignment with that thought process just makes life so juicy.
That's a very key point you just mentioned, the idea of working with people you align with. It's something that I think everybody would agree with it on some level, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who just don't feel like they would have the opportunity to do that. Or they feel that it's beyond their capability to even make that kind of a shift. Or, there's a number of different possible explanations about why they don't make that change. But from your perspective, when you encounter somebody who has that feeling that, well, that sounds great, but I don't see how I could do that, how do you address that with them?
Well, that's coming from like a victim mentality, and so I just don't think I could do that. So the line of question would be like, well, why not? And what's stopping you? And what do you need to get that? And what is it you want? And like, what would that look like for you? And and it depends how stubborn they are too, right? And how stuck they are on their point of view about it not being able to work for them. Because that's challenging. That's like really, and some people are stuck there and they just don't want to give up their point of view. But yeah, it looks like that's what the kind of line of questioning looks like. And sometimes, to be honest with you, Walt, it's like, okay, well then that's that you get to be right. Whether you go for it, you just get to be right. And that's a fundamental issue with human beings, is we fight to be right even when it doesn't serve us.
Yes. Yeah. It's odd, but it's true.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll fight to be right even when it doesn't serve us. And even though we believe that we're not right, but we feel like we need to be right, so we got to be right.
We just don't give it up. And all of a sudden now it's an ego thing. We've realized it and we can't say anything about it.
Yeah. Right. Or it's not going to change anything. I remember having that conversation with my dad a couple of years ago. I really wanted to be right about some friends that did some things that were inappropriate to me or whatever. They wronged me. And I had realized in that moment, like, oh, I want to be right about this. I want to be right that they were shitty friends. And he was like, oh yeah. And in this moment, I realized that won't make me feel any better anyway. Like, what does it matter? Okay, I'm right. Who cares? Yeah. Like, it's not serving me to want to be right. It's not getting me where I want to go. So how can I move past that point of being right? What do I really want anyway?
Yeah, good for you.
There's another interesting piece to this too that just occurred to me, which is not only do we want to be right, but we are also very good at beating the crap out of ourselves. That's something we talk about a lot here on the show.
Mm.
And what occurred to me was being right is a way to give ourselves a respite from beating the crap out of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, to layer as a different perspective, it's also the source of why we beat the crap out of ourselves.
Right. Yes.
So in
Isn't
that
that the truth?
moment, when we're fighting for it, we're relieved from beating ourselves up. But once we get off that, we're going to start beating ourselves up again. Because we see the impact of what it's done to fight for being right when we're like, that's humanness. That's humanness. That's, humanity.
We're really good at it. I always say it's good to have a skill, but I'm not sure if that's the one you want to have.
I
in
would
your
agree.
wheelhouse.
We're interesting creatures as humans.
Mm.
Well, that's part of what it is to be on this journey, to discover and share these stories with each other and realize, oh, I'm not the only one who does this. I'm not the only one who feels that way. I'm not the only one who's ever experienced that. I'm not the only one who ever, came across that way of thinking about myself or treated myself that way or thought about somebody else this way. I'm not the only one. I mean, if there's anything that I've learned more than anything else from doing this podcast, and probably number one is all the perspectives I've gotten. But if there's one thing I've learned more than anything else, it's amazing how many people have gone through the same kind of stuff I've gone through. Just amazing.
Yeah. It's like, I've described it like this before. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or what your sexual orientation is or what your race is. There's feelings. We all have feelings. We're humans. And I feel like as a human body, as a group of people, we all have the same feelings, and we get to how we feel in a different way. Perhaps as a woman in her 47s felt oppressed a particular way. Perhaps, somebody else who has a completely different background was oppressed in a certain way. And both those avenues got us to the feeling of not belonging or being abandoned or rejected in some way. So although who you are and how you look and what you're composed of physically from the eye is different than me, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to feel things differently, and how we get there is different, but that doesn't mean how we feel about it is different. And so there's so much alikeness in that. If we could just get over the difference in how we look or the context from which we got to that point.
And that's part of the reason why I mentioned it, because just talking to so many different people and realizing that we're all pretty much on the same route, somehow all that other stuff that you mentioned, which of course we all tend to bring up, what your gender is, what your orientation is, somehow all that doesn't seem as important anymore, because we're all feeling, wow, we're all feeling the same thing.
Yeah. So can we just be friends?
Yeah, right.
We all just get along.
Yeah, like do you have to be more right than I am when we're feeling the same thing? We just got there different. Yeah, no, I get it. It's a good.
I think that's part of the enlightenment process.
Yeah, it's such a good
coming to
point.
realize that,
Yeah.
I think too that we often get into this cycle as humans of like thinking that our pain is like worse.
Right.
Ours is worse, yes.
Mine is worse because my story is horrific. And it's really interesting because I've been going on this fertility journey for a number of years, and obviously there's been a lot of pain and anguish with that. And it's so interesting because my two best friends are also on their own journeys with fertility, and one has a similar story with struggles that I do, and the other one, she's perfectly healthy, just hasn't happened yet. And I remember this was actually like 3 or 4 weeks ago. We all sat around the table, and I remember being like, yeah, but like I feel like you can't just, because I'm the youngest, you can't just be like, oh, you're sweet and cute and whatever, you got no problems. Like my problems are valid. And as I said that out loud, then I began to listen to what they were saying. And the realization for me was it didn't matter whether my story was X and her story was Y and her story was F or whatever. That pain that we were just talking about was as deep in each one of us. It didn't matter how we had gotten there. We were feeling very, very similar things, maybe not the exact same thing, but their pain was as valid as mine. And that was a huge, huge moment for me.
I think it's also something that everybody wants. They want the validation. I think it's one of the reasons we tend to do what you're describing. Say, "Oh, mine's much worse than anybody else's," because we're looking for the validation. Maybe kind of a backhanded way of doing it, but that's what we're doing, really.
Absolutely.
We want to be seen and heard. Yeah, we want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
We don't want to be. We don't want our pain to be dismissed. Yeah.
And more importantly, when it's acknowledged, when it's validated, when we get that feedback that says, "Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm feeling your pain." It's almost like that becomes the moment when we can let go of it. Up until then, we can't really let go of it. But at that point, once it's been validated, like, oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that's about being witnessed. That's about being witnessed. That's what we call in the coaching world of being witnessed. There's a power in being witnessed, just to be seen. It's almost like you can't let go until you're seen. And it's such a beautiful gift to give to another human being. And it's such a heartbreak when someone doesn't get that. Yeah.
I'm reminded of a number of the teachings that I've picked up over the years from the people I've interviewed. And one of them was the idea of appreciation, learning how to appreciate stuff that we don't like. Appreciate stuff that, went wrong, or I had the bad result or something like that.
Right.
And I remember the first time I heard that, I said, that's baloney. Why would you want to do that? That's just crazy. But over time, I've come to appreciate how important that appreciation is. But not only to appreciate how important it is, to also appreciate that when you appreciate that stuff, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for other people too. Because again, this validation thing, everybody has some degree of the validation thing going on whenever a negative event is happening.
Right. Oh, that appreciation.
It's all in the unpacking, right? You learn it all in the unpacking of it, or like the review of it, or the debriefing of it. And there's just so much gold. That's why I call it like slicing and dicing. Like, I just love these conversations where you just get to like nuance out the energetic dynamic of an interaction. It's just like, it's like a magic carpet ride. There's just so many jewels everywhere.
Did you always think of it as an energetic thing? You just referred to it that way, but
yeah, it's energy for me.
Has it always been that way for you?
Yeah, it's like it's the energetic space between two people, and so it's a dynamic, and then they put language to it for me. So when I really be with people, or when I really listen, to be honest with you, I'm listening for the energy. Only really 5% of what you actually say is your communication. 95% lives in the world of the unsaid. And I think I have two gifts that I've come to recognize. One I realized a little earlier, my articulation and the way I can put words to nuanced in situations. And then two is like how I interpret and read energy. Which is great because they go hand in hand, and so when I can put words to what someone is feeling and, in the dynamic of it, it really can help them process, which is great. So yeah, it's always been an energy thing for me. I wouldn't say that I would have called it that when I was younger, but now that I've been calling it that for several years now, but now that I know, yes, it's always been that.
What would you have called it when you were younger?
Well, like the first thing that comes to mind is intuition. I wouldn't maybe have considered it as energy. Like, I don't know that I would have put the two of that together. I would have told you I was really smart.
Okay. Right again.
This is why I wanted to be a lawyer, because I can read people. I mean, like I'm talking like younger, like before 20, like that's probably like, 17, 16, when I was a little bit more sassy and coming from a more wounded place. Those are probably some of the things I would have said.
Okay.
I have a feeling you're still sassy, Sophie.
Yeah, thanks.
And proud of it.
Yeah, it's a little playful. It's a little playful. I be with it differently than when I was younger. Yeah. It's very different to be sassy coming from I'm not completely healed. I'm human. I'm still in my evolution.
Yes.
But to come from a more healed place, to be sassy is a very different impact and energy that somebody experiences. And when you're coming from an unhealed place, one's a little
100%.
Yeah, one's cutting and one's kind of like playful and uplifting.
Interesting you mentioned that. I was having an online conversation with somebody today, not related to what we're talking about here, but there was enough parallel. And he wanted to be right. That was an interesting piece of it. Right. But he also wanted to be right about something where he was trying to justify. I can't really get into his stuff because it's his stuff. But he was basically trying to justify something that most people would shake their heads and say, "Really? Are you sure you want to justify that?" But he was very fervent about it. It was very, very important to him. And I guess that kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier, that I think you labeled it a victim mindset, but it's the mindset
Right.
where it's got to be this way. It just has to be because my beingness is wrapped up in it. It just goes to show how easily we can get wrapped up in that. Wow.
Well, yeah, it's also considered like black and white thinking, which is a trauma response too, right? So, like in the sense is like the live or die, black, white, that's a trauma response. Like, so somebody who's been through a lot of trauma, who's had to like be in such pressure where they had to like, they were in constant interpretations of life as being life or death. That what you're talking about is a manifestation or like a result of that, a side effect of that.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one to grow through.
Sure. Because you don't see that if you're in the middle of that, you don't see that as a barrier.
Yeah, also don't see that it's not life or death, or that you're interpreting it like an attack. You're like so in it. Yeah, I used to like it, that plagues me sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, I think it plagues all of us at one time or another. Multiple times.
That's so normal.
It's just part of it. I think what happens over time is you get to the point where you just don't care all that much anymore. But up until then, you care a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I don't care so much anymore, and then sometimes it's just like, well, like that's just more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like being right. I don't care. It's a different slice of it. You know what? I'm going to be right over here. Well, I don't care about anything. I don't know.
So in other words, how do you care without really caring is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Well, no,
But not care too much.
You do have a point, and I should highlight that too, like not to be so sassy about it, but there does come a point in time where it's kind of like let it go, like you just let everything go, and it's just like, it doesn't affect you the way it used to affect you. Maybe I just didn't love the way I don't care came into it, because it's like I feel like there's distinct, and I think and I think what you were trying to say was, if I heard you correctly, is there really does come a point when you do let stuff go and it just doesn't have the emotional charge, and you can walk around neutral, which is very different than where I was going, was like, well, if I just don't care, it was kind of just
It's like
more
the middle
about,
finger.
right? Yeah, exactly. It's a big middle finger. Perfect. Exactly. Yeah.
I think for me, the phrase that expresses it the best is, "Am I sure I really want to do that?" That's the one. That's the one I tend to go for that one first. It's like, do I really, really want to go there? Really? Because until I ask that question, I often will just stay there.
Well, and I think choosing your peace is okay. I also think that's a difference. Like that's also, there's that also, I could distinguish that even more too. Like it's almost very different than, I don't care, here's my finger, and I've let everything go and it doesn't impact me anymore. It's like, I feel something here. I understand the energetic and emotional cost if I engage in that. There is a contribution I could make. There is a repercussion, and I'm just not sure it's worth it. So I choose my peace. And that is so okay. And I feel like we don't get that. Most of us don't get that until you've been through something like what I've gone through, divorce and cancer and all that jazz. Or you're older and you just finally realize what peace is. And you're like, you know what? You kids will figure it out.
Yeah. Sometimes I tag, I hope, at the end of that. But yes, I get your point. Yes.
Yeah, I hope. Or you'll choose your peace and this won't happen anymore.
Right.
Yeah. I love that.
So let me ask both of you, because both of you guys are coaches. You both coach around energy. You also coach around money and so forth. I'm going to be curious to see where the parallels and differences are here. But when you sit down, and you also have a tendency, both of you like to work with women. So I'm going to stay on the female side of the equation here. When you're working with a woman, and the woman, she's very clear about what she wants, but she has one of these barriers we're talking about, and she's not feeling good about changing that barrier or questioning it or doing whatever it takes to get around it. What's your take? How do you actually help somebody like that, or at least try to help somebody like that? I'm going to go to JodieLynn first, get her answer, and then we'll go to Sophie.
Yep.
Ooh, put me in the hot seat.
Yeah.
For me in my coaching practice, I will often try and get to the root of what is holding them back in terms of what do you think you're going to lose? Because a lot of times it comes down to fear. Like, you don't want to change, you don't want to do things different, you don't want to open up, whatever it is. Like, what do you fear? What do you perceive you're going to lose if said thing happens, or if you allow this to happen? And a lot of that is what's the word I'm looking for? Unconscious conditioning. Like, oh, well, if I'm not, super stringent and super focused, and if I don't work, every single day, and I work like this, if I take any breaks, then I'm going to lose an opportunity, and then I'm not going to make enough money, and then I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills, and then if I don't have enough money to pay my bills, then I'm not going to have a place to live, and I'm going to be homeless, and then I'm going to die. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the bottom of it.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of? What's underneath that, really getting to that point? And when you see it, when you can witness it, like you were talking about, Sophie, when you can see that that's what you're afraid of, a lot of times you're like, well, me taking a break today and restoring my body and rejuvenating and having that rest that I truly, truly need is not going to lead to my death. What I'm doing right now is going to lead to my death, or could lead to my death. So really understanding what it is that they're afraid of, or what they're afraid to lose if something happens. That's where I'd start.
Okay. How about you, Sophie?
Yeah, I love what she said. I agree that it comes from a place of fear. So what I would layer onto that, because it's also a place that I would start a different point, it could be a different starting point, is to really have the woman understand the impact it has on her life and people around her. So like, what's her behavior? First of all, I want to understand who the next iteration of herself, the next version of herself that she wants to be calling forth, like her higher version of herself, what she wants to be known for, what she wants her legacy to be, what she wants people to say about her when she leaves the room, like that sort of thing. And then I would go to, okay, so this behavior, how does it line up to what you say that you want, so that she can start to see the impact that it's having on how she wants herself to be seen, how she wants herself to be known as, how she wants to know herself as. And I just start to like nuance it like that for her, so she can really get to see that this is what's in the way of all of that. And then she has a choice. She can either choose to keep it in place, or she can choose to work on it and shift. And sometimes, a lot of the times, because the human brain is like an elastic, you can stretch them so far and then they go back. And so the work is continually helping her make new choices, becoming aware and making new choices in the moment that are more towards what she wants, rather than keeping her stuck or moving her backwards. And that's a process, no less than 6 months, in my opinion.
Does that match your experience too, JodieLynn? 6 months?
Oh yeah. Well,
Like
I think, Sophie touched on it earlier. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go to one course and then I'm done. I'm never going to do anything again. And I'm not saying you need to go to course after course after course after course. Like, maybe that is what you need to do. You need to keep learning. But this is an evolution. And I don't think that we're ever done. Like, I don't think that we're ever done until, you're buried in the ground. There's always something for you to learn, always something for you, like those jewels that Sophie was talking about, to glean from what's happening in your life, and an opportunity to grow into, I don't want to use the word something better, but a new version of yourself that is even more expansive than the one that sits here today. So I think that's what a lot of people miss, is like, oh, one and done. No, this is the rest of your life. Growing.
Yeah, and if I could layer on top of that too, it's so funny. I did a live about this today, and it's like, sometimes I feel like we don't want to shed the skin. It's so interesting. I have like this really bad burn. You could like see my skin is shedding. It's just such a great metaphor right now. Like, sometimes we don't want to shed the skin because the skin underneath is like so new and vulnerable. And like right now, that skin, when it touches the air, like it kind of hurts a little bit. And it's like, as a human, to shed that skin and you let that new version of you, your new higher self version, the more evolved version, it's like, we don't understand, like I was saying earlier, what it's like to stand in my truth. I'm just connecting the dot for myself. We don't understand that to step into the next version of ourselves, for day 1, day 2, day 3, might look like a little deer coming out of his mama with the weak legs. It's like there's a vulnerability in that, because you don't have the same certainty of what it's like to have lived, like, to have behaved that way before, because these are new behaviors and thought processes and ways of speaking that you're taking on. And so the vulnerability causes us to wobble. The best thing to do is to get a coach or a mentor to support you through that so you don't go back. And sometimes the wobble is too unfamiliar. And so that for the ego brain makes it scary, and we retract. And I feel like I'm so happy we're having this part of the conversation, because I feel like more people need to understand and really, really to be okay and normalize the fact that a new version of you, or trying something on new, speaking, thinking, whatever that is, it is going to feel a bit like you're a newborn for a minute or two. And can you navigate that with strength and conviction, and be okay with that until you get your, it's not strength and power because you already have that, but maybe until you get your footing, you know?
Yeah, until it becomes familiar.
Yeah, until you're like, you're comfortable with it, and you know?
A lot of agreement going on here. Not surprising, but a lot of agreement going on here. Yeah, good stuff. Couple things we want to get from you, Sophie, before we part company for the day. First of all, if someone wants to work with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, there's two best ways. One is my email. So S as in Sam, D as in David at sophietalks.com. That's SOPHIETALKS.com. And the other is my Instagram. It's at the Sophie Deslauriers. So THESOPHIEDESLAURIERS.
And do they need to actually be ready to work with you, or can they just contact you to ask you a question about something, or how do you handle that kind of thing?
If you want both, you could email me. We could schedule a call. We could have a short conversation to identify whether or not we're a fit. You can DM me on my Instagram, and we can have a short conversation there. And within a very short period of time, me and whoever the other person is gonna know what to do with the conversation. So yeah, that works. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big part. I mean, I almost asked the question earlier, but I think you kind of answered it anyway. How do you pick a coach? I think you just described it very nicely. That's how you pick a coach.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, how you pick a coach is like I would recommend you go for somebody who has the lived experience of what you want, and who has the wisdom and the results that align with where you want to go, and be specific about that. I mean, like, I remember when I was looking for a therapist when I went through a divorce, and I was just like, how can I be with somebody who's never been divorced before, or has been married for 18 years? Like, all that textbook knowledge and in talking to other people is not the same as going through it yourself. And when you actually go through something yourself, there's nuances and language you can put to stuff that somebody else, in my opinion, just can't. And I think it's really important to consider those things when you're looking for a coach. Yeah.
Really good. I like that a lot. One of those other things that I want to tell you, this is something that I do as a regular practice here on the show, because I noticed about a little over a year and a half ago that we have a tendency. I mean, we have lots of people like you who come onto the show. They have these wonderful stories, and they have these gifts they want to share with the world. And here's these wonderful things I've learned, and I want to make sure everybody gets it and all that. It's wonderful. They're all givers, and I love the giving aspect. But we have a tendency to kind of skip over some of the giving. Like, you come onto a podcast and there's some listeners who pick some stuff up, and you never know about it. Or maybe you write a post on a social media, and then people pick up from that and they get some benefit. And you never know about that. And to me, that's like a big gap. Like, wait a minute, there's all these people who are benefiting, and you're not finding out about it. You're not getting any feedback or any appreciation or anything. So I figure, well, at the very least, we can give you some appreciation. So on behalf of those people that you've been helping, that you've never met, that you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, but you've been helping them in ways that you don't even know about necessarily. On their behalf, thank you for what you've been doing, because you're making a difference in their lives.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I feel that in my heart. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Okay, JodieLynn, you know where I'm coming next. Always the last question that I ask on every single show. What's the big takeaway? I mean, you got like 25 of them. I know you can draw on, but what's the one you're going to pick?
Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to something that I've already said in what a beautiful message from Sophie today. In tragedy, there is the light of opportunity, and what a beautiful story to really display an opportunity, several opportunities along her journey to evolve as a person, and just an incredible light that other people can look to that are going through similar things, or really, let's be honest, anything. When we're feeling down, it's great to look out into the world and see somebody who's been through something that's tough and looked at it as an opportunity and grew from it, and not only grew, but flourished and evolved. So you're a great light to us all, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And we appreciate you joining us and sharing your story with us. So thank you for that as well. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.